Welcome to Healthy Kidneys After 60. I am your host, Jane Pauley. They say that as we cross the threshold of our 60s, our relationship with food changes from a simple pleasure to a complex set of calculations. We worry about our heart, our memory, and our strength. Today, we are diving into a topic that has sparked decades of debate in every kitchen across America: the humble egg. Is it a nutritional powerhouse or a hidden enemy of our arteries? To help us navigate this, I am honored to welcome a man who has dedicated his career to making complex medicine feel like a conversation over the garden fence, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Sanjay, thank you for being here with us.
It is truly a pleasure to be here, Jane. You know, in my years of practicing medicine and reporting on health, I have met thousands of seniors who are genuinely confused and honestly a little afraid of what is on their breakfast plate. They want to do the right thing, but the advice seems to change every few years. I am so glad we are taking the time today to slow down and really look at the science and the stories behind the nutrition, because at this stage of life, those small daily choices are exactly what determine how vibrantly we live our next 20 or 30 years.
Dr. Gupta, I want to start with a question that I hear almost every time I sit down with friends my age, and it usually comes up right as the waiter is taking our brunch orders. We look at the menu, we see an omelet or a soft-boiled egg, and then we hesitate. There is this lingering shadow of doubt that has been cast over the egg for nearly 40 years. We were told for so long that eggs are essentially little cholesterol bombs waiting to clog our pipes. So I have to ask you directly, as we sit here today in a world full of conflicting headlines, for those of us over 65, is the egg a friend we should welcome back to the table, or is it a risk that we are better off avoiding? Why is there still so much mystery around something so simple?
Jane, it is such a profound question because it touches on the core of how medical science evolves and how that evolution often leaves the public feeling whiplashed. For decades, the egg was the villain of the breakfast table because it is undeniably high in dietary cholesterol. But what we have learned through massive long-term studies, including significant data published in the British Medical Journal, is that for the vast majority of healthy adults, eating about one egg a day does not significantly increase the risk of heart disease or stroke. You see, the egg is a fascinating little package. It is what I call nature's multivitamin for the golden years. It contains high-quality protein, which is vital for keeping our muscles strong so we don't lose our balance. It has choline for the brain, lutein for the eyes, and essential vitamins like D and B12. When we tell a 68-year-old to cut out eggs entirely because of a fear from the 1980s, we might inadvertently be robbing them of the very nutrients they need to stay sharp and mobile. We have been looking at the wrong culprit in the mystery of heart health for a long time.
That is a powerful shift in perspective, Sanjay. It feels almost like a relief to hear, but I can already hear the voices of our listeners wondering about the catch. If the egg itself isn't the primary enemy we once thought it was, then why did we see so many cases of rising cholesterol and heart issues linked to these breakfast habits? You mentioned that we might have been scared of the wrong thing for decades. If it isn't the cholesterol in the egg that is the main problem, then what exactly is it? Is it the way we are cooking them, or is there something else lurking on that breakfast plate that we have been ignoring while we were busy blaming the egg?
That is exactly the aha moment, Jane. The real villain isn't the egg itself, it is the company the egg keeps. Imagine a classic American breakfast plate. You have two beautiful poached eggs, but right next to them are 3 strips of greasy, salt-laden bacon, a side of hash browns fried in butter, and 2 slices of white toast slathered in margarine or more butter. When researchers look at the health outcomes of people who eat eggs, they have to peel back the layers of the rest of the diet. For years, we blamed the egg for the damage that the saturated fats from the bacon and the refined carbohydrates from the white bread were doing to our arteries. Science now shows that for most of us, our bodies actually adjust. When we eat dietary cholesterol, our liver simply produces less of it to maintain a balance. However, our bodies do not have that same off switch for the saturated fats and trans fats found in processed meats and heavy butter. So when people ask me if they should stop eating eggs, I tell them that the egg is often the most innocent thing on the plate. It is the surrounding cast, the bacon, the sausages, the butter, that is actually casting the shadow. If we change what is sitting next to the egg itself becomes a powerful ally for our health after 65.
So it really is about the neighborhood the egg lives in on our plate. It seems we've been focusing on the wrong suspect, while the real culprits were hiding in plain sight. If we can transform the plate, as you say, we might be able to reclaim this simple food as a tool for aging well. I want to dig deeper into how this specifically helps our bodies as we get older, because I know many of us feel that slowing down is just an inevitable part of the clock ticking. Dr. Gupta, I often hear from our viewers who are in their late 60s and 70s about a very specific kind of fear that seems to creep up on them almost overnight. They tell me they feel like their bodies are betraying them, that they wake up one morning and realize they can no longer keep up with their grandkids in the park, or that their legs feel heavy and unreliable when they try to climb a flight of stairs. It is a quiet, steady erosion of strength that makes the world feel smaller and more dangerous. I think many of us just shrug and say it is the tax we pay for living a long life, but is this rapid weakening truly inevitable? Or are we missing a critical piece of the puzzle in how we fuel our bodies to maintain that vital physical independence?
Jane, what you are describing is a condition we call sarcopenia, which is essentially the age-related loss of muscle mass, but I prefer to think of it as the silent thief of independence. It starts slowly, but once it gains momentum, it can lead to a devastating cycle of falls and hospitalizations. I remember very clearly a patient of mine named Mary Thompson, a 68-year-old woman living in Tampa, Florida. Mary was the pillar of her family, always active, but she started coming to see me because she was constantly exhausted and had experienced a few frightening stumbles while walking her dog. When we sat down to look at her life, it turned out that out of a deep-seated fear of cholesterol, Mary had almost entirely cut out protein from her breakfast. She was starting her days with just a piece of plain dry toast or a small sugary pastry and tea. She thought she was protecting her heart, but in reality, she was starving her muscles of the high-quality protein they desperately needed to repair themselves. For someone like Mary, her body was literally breaking down its own muscle tissue just to keep going because there was no fuel coming in. It was heartbreaking to see her lose her confidence, afraid to even step off a curb because her legs felt like jelly, all because she was trying to follow health advice that was incomplete and outdated for her current stage of life.
It is so tragic to think that Mary was trying to do the right thing for her heart, yet she was inadvertently making herself more vulnerable to a life-changing fall. Many people in her position feel that they just don't have the appetite for a heavy meal in the morning, or they worry that eating more will lead to weight gain or digestive issues. How do we bridge that gap for someone who wants to stay strong but feels overwhelmed by the idea of changing their entire diet? And what was it about the humble egg that specifically turned the tide for someone like Mary in her daily struggle for strength?
The beauty of the solution for Mary was its simplicity, and that is where the egg plays its starring role. Eggs provide what we call a complete protein, meaning they have all the essential building blocks our bodies can't make on their own. And for seniors, they are incredibly easy to digest compared to a heavy steak or tough fibers. I encouraged Mary to stop looking at the egg as a threat and start seeing it as a medical necessity for her muscles. We started small, just one soft-boiled egg with a side of steamed spinach or a few slices of avocado. Within just a few weeks, the change in her was nothing short of miraculous. She told me the heavy fog of fatigue started to lift and she felt a certain sturdiness returning to her gait. By the second month, she was back to walking her dog for 30 minutes every morning in the Florida sunshine, without that constant nagging fear of her knees buckling. She wasn't just eating an egg. She was reclaiming her right to move through the world. We have to understand that as we age, our protein needs actually go up, not down, because our bodies become less efficient at processing it. A simple egg is often the most efficient, cost-effective, and gentle way to give an aging body the strength to stay upright, active, and most importantly, independent. Mary's story isn't just about nutrition. It is about the courage to change a habit to save your quality of life, proving that we don't have to accept weakness as our final chapter if we are willing to feed our strength.
Sanjay, we really need to tackle the elephant in the room because even with Mary's success, I know there is a voice in the back of many people's minds screaming about arteries and heart attacks. For decades, the medical community and the media pounded it into our heads that cholesterol in food equals cholesterol in the blood, which equals a one-way ticket to a cardiac ward. It created a generation of people who look at a golden egg yolk with the same suspicion they would a pack of cigarettes. If we are now saying that this isn't the whole truth, how do we reconcile that with everything we were told for 40 years? And what does the modern science actually say to a 70-year-old who is terrified that one egg a day is going to be the thing that causes a blockage?
Jane, I completely understand that fear because it was born out of early nutritional science that was well-intentioned but lacked the full picture. We used to believe the human body was like a simple plumbing system where if you poured grease down the drain, it would naturally clog. But the human body is a sophisticated chemical factory. For most people, when you eat more cholesterol from a natural source like an egg, your liver recognizes the influx and says, okay, I don't need to produce as much today, and it scales back its own production to maintain a steady level. This is a brilliant biological feedback loop. Extensive research, including major meta-analyses that have looked at hundreds of thousands of people, has shown that for the general population, there is no significant link between moderate egg consumption and an increased risk of heart disease or stroke. We were so focused on the cholesterol number on the nutrition label that we missed the forest for the trees. The real danger to our heart health isn't the cholesterol found in an egg. It is the inflammatory response triggered by trans fats, highly processed seed oils, and the mountain of refined sugars that have become staples of the modern diet. When we tell a senior to avoid eggs, they often replace that protein with a bagel or a sugary cereal, which actually causes far more damage to their vascular system through insulin spikes and inflammation than an egg ever could.
That realization feels like a massive weight being lifted, but it also makes me wonder why the old advice stuck around for so long. If the science was shifting, it seems like we've been living under a nutritional shadow that has actually caused us to make worse choices in our search for safety. If the egg isn't the one clogging the pipes, then we have to be very clear about what the true culprits are, because I suspect many of our listeners are still eating things every morning that they think are safe, but are actually far more dangerous than the egg they've been avoiding.
You are hitting on the most critical point of our discussion, Jane. The reason the egg myth persisted is that it's a very simple, easy-to-digest headline, whereas the truth about metabolism is complex and harder to explain in a 30-second soundbite. While we were all busy pointing fingers at the egg, we were ignoring the bacon, the sausage, the heavily salted butter, and the white flour pancakes. Those are the foods that are packed with saturated fats and nitrates that truly wreak havoc on our cholesterol profiles and arterial walls. In clinical practice, I've seen that the danger usually lies in the context of the meal. If you take a healthy, protein-rich egg and fry it in a pool of low-quality margarine and serve it with processed meat, of course your heart health is going to suffer, but it is guilt by association. We have spent years punishing the egg for the crimes of the bacon. For a senior today, the most important thing they can do is look at the whole plate. If you have a poached or boiled egg with a side of fiber-rich vegetables or some whole grains, you are providing your heart with the nutrients it needs to stay resilient. It is time we stop living in fear of a natural whole food and start looking at the industrial processed additives that have actually been the ones doing the damage all along. We need to shift our focus from avoiding cholesterol to reducing inflammation. And in that new framework, the egg is no longer the villain. It's a nutrient-dense tool for longevity.
It is fascinating to realize how much our habits are shaped by these partial truths, but even when we know better, old habits die hard, especially the ones that feel like comfort. I'm thinking about the many people who might hear this and think, great, I can have my eggs back, but they continue to prepare them exactly the same way they have for 50 years, perhaps unknowingly keeping themselves in a danger zone. Dr. Gupta, I'm curious about those specific everyday mistakes that happen in the kitchen, the ones that turn a healthy intention into a health risk without us even realizing it. Is there a way to tell when our healthy breakfast is actually a hidden trap for our cardiovascular system?
Jane, this is where the rubber meets the road, and it's often the hardest part of the conversation because it requires us to look honestly at our traditions. I think of a patient named Robert Jenkins, a 74-year-old gentleman from Columbus, Ohio. Robert was a wonderful man, very disciplined, but his LDL cholesterol levels were stubbornly high and he couldn't understand why. He told me, "Doctor, I'm eating my eggs just like you said they might be okay." But when we walked through his actual morning routine, the problem became clear. Every single morning, Robert was frying 2 eggs in a large pat of salted butter until the edges were crispy and brown, and he was serving them alongside 3 thick slices of bacon and white toast with more butter. To Robert, this was just a good breakfast. He didn't see the bacon as an occasional treat. He saw it as the egg's permanent partner. He was essentially surrounding a healthy protein with a fortress of saturated fat and sodium. I had to be very honest with him. I told him, "Robert, your body is struggling not because of the eggs, but because of the environment you are putting them in. The heat from frying the eggs in butter at high temperatures can oxidize the fats, and the processed meat is like a slow-release toxin for his blood pressure." This is the silent error many seniors make. They keep the partners that are actually harming them because that's how they've always done it.
That sounds like a difficult conversation to have, especially when someone feels they are already trying their best. It's that guilt by association you mentioned earlier. If someone like Robert wants to keep his eggs but truly protect his heart, what does that transition look like in a practical, everyday sense? It seems like a lot to ask someone to give up their bacon and butter after 7 decades. So how do you guide them toward a version of breakfast that feels just as satisfying but doesn't carry that heavy price tag for their arteries?
It's all about the 3 great swaps, and I told Robert this was about evolution, not deprivation. First, we swapped the butter for a small drizzle of heart-healthy olive oil or even just poaching the eggs in water. Second, we took the bacon off the daily menu. I didn't tell him he could never have it, but we replaced it with sautéed mushrooms, tomatoes, or spinach. These vegetables provide the potassium and fiber that actually help lower blood pressure, acting as a natural counterbalance. Third, we traded the white bread for a dense sprouted grain or whole wheat toast. At first, Robert was skeptical. He thought it would be bland and rabbit food. But after a week, he realized he didn't have that heavy, greasy after-breakfast slump that he used to feel. He felt lighter, more energized. The most incredible part was his next blood test. Without any new medication, his LDL numbers began to trend downward for the first time in years. This is the message I want everyone to hear. You don't have to give up the things you love, but you do have to be smart about who they hang out with on your plate. If Robert had stayed on his old path, he was looking at a significantly higher risk of a stroke or a heart attack within the next few years. By making those small, silent adjustments in his kitchen in Ohio, he took control of his future. We have to stop blaming the egg and start looking at the frying pan and the side dish, because that is where the real health battle is won or lost every single morning.
Sanjay, as we get older, there is one fear that often outweighs almost everything else, even the fear of a heart attack. It's the fear of losing our minds, the fear of that slow, creeping fog where names slip away, where we lose our sharpness and start to feel like a stranger in our own lives. We've been talking about muscles and hearts, but I want to turn to the brain. I've heard whispers in the medical community that the very thing we've been told to throw away, the egg yolk, might actually contain a secret weapon for brain health. Is it possible that by trying to save our hearts by skipping the yolk, we've actually been starving our brains of what they need to stay young?
Jane, you've touched on something that is absolutely vital and frankly quite moving. There is a nutrient called choline, and it is one of the most underrated components of our diet, especially for the aging brain. The egg yolk is one of the single most concentrated sources of choline on the planet. Choline is the precursor to acetylcholine, which is a key neurotransmitter involved in memory, mood, and muscle control. It is essentially the messenger that allows your brain cells to talk to each other. I remember a patient, James Wilson, a 90-year-old man from Phoenix, Arizona. James lived alone and had become very set in his ways, often just having a bowl of plain white rice or some crackers for breakfast because they were easy. He started complaining of severe brain fog and was convinced he was in the early stages of dementia. He was terrified, Jane. But when we looked at his nutritional profile, he was profoundly deficient in B vitamins and choline. He was literally lacking the raw materials his brain needed to form memories. We introduced eggs back into his diet, specifically the yolks he had been avoiding for years out of fear. The research, like the studies coming out of the Framingham Heart Study, shows that higher choline intake is linked to better cognitive function and fewer brain lesions. For James, adding that brain fuel back into his morning routine wasn't a cure-all, but it provided his nervous system with the support it was starving for. It's a tragic irony that the very part of the egg we were told to discard is the part that nourishes our intellect.
It's heartbreaking to think of someone like James sitting in his home in Phoenix, fearing he's losing himself, when the answer might be as simple as the nutrition he was missing. This idea of pseudo-dementia or memory loss caused by simple deficiencies is something many people haven't heard of. They just assume that if they're 90, they're supposed to be forgetful. How does something as simple as an egg yolk actually make a difference in the day-to-day life of someone who feels they are slipping away? And why is it so important that we get these nutrients from food rather than just popping another supplement pill?
That's the crucial distinction, Jane. The brain doesn't just need isolated chemicals, it needs the complex delivery system that nature provides. In an egg, you're not just getting choline, you're getting it alongside healthy fats that help your body actually absorb that choline and transport it across the blood-brain barrier. When James started eating eggs again, he described it as the lights coming back on. He found he could follow the plot of his favorite shows more easily, and he wasn't struggling as much to find the right words in conversation. This isn't magic, it's basic biological maintenance. As we age, our brains become more sensitive to nutritional gaps. When we are missing B12 and choline, our brain literally starts to shrink faster than it should. By giving James a simple, affordable source of these nutrients, we weren't just feeding his body, we were protecting his identity. For any of our listeners who feel that senior moment happening more often than they'd like, I want you to ask yourself, am I giving my brain the building blocks it needs? We spend so much money on expensive brain games and puzzles, but we often ignore the most powerful cognitive support tool sitting right in our refrigerator. The yolk isn't just a part of an egg. For a 90-year-old like James, it can be a lifeline for his most precious memories and his ability to stay connected to the people he loves.
It is so powerful to hear how much of our vitality is tied to these small choices. But I want to talk about the red flags. Those moments when our bodies are trying to tell us something is wrong before it becomes a crisis. So many of us ignore a little bit of blurry vision or a struggle to see the road at night, dismissing it as just getting old. We buy stronger reading glasses, and we stop driving after dark, slowly retreating from our lives. Is there a connection between these warning lights and what we are putting on our plates? Can the right nutrients actually slow down the clock for our most vital senses? Or is fading eyesight just an inevitable part of the journey?
Jane, it is one of the most common things I hear. Doctor, I just thought this was what 80 looks like. But our bodies are incredibly communicative if we know how to listen. I think of Linda Park, an 82-year-old woman from Seattle. Linda was an avid reader and loved her evening drives to see her grandchildren, but she started noticing that the headlights of oncoming cars were becoming blindingly bright and the words on the page were starting to swim in a haze. She was terrified of macular degeneration, which is a leading cause of vision loss in seniors. When Linda came to see me, we talked about her diet. Like so many others, she had been avoiding eggs because she was watching her numbers. What she didn't realize was that she was also cutting out her primary source of lutein and zeaxanthin. Damn. These are two incredibly powerful antioxidants found in high concentrations in egg yolks. Think of them as natural sunglasses for your retinas. They accumulate in the macula of the eye and filter out harmful blue light and protect against oxidative damage. For Linda, her body was turning on the red light because her eyes were literally losing their internal protection. She wasn't just getting old, she was nutritionally defenseless against the light.
It's fascinating to think of food as internal sunglasses. Many of us would never dream of going out in the bright sun without protection, yet we are leaving our eyes vulnerable from the inside out. Linda's story in Seattle is so relatable because that loss of independence, not being able to drive at night, is such a huge blow to one's spirit. If someone is seeing these signs, how do they start to turn it around? Is it as simple as adding an egg to the menu? And why specifically is the egg yolk so much more effective for this than perhaps a salad or a pill?
It's about bioavailability, Jane. While you can find lutein in leafy greens like kale, The lutein in egg yolks is packaged with fats, which makes it much easier for the human body to absorb and use. I suggested to Linda that she start including eggs back into her morning, specifically cooking them gently to preserve those delicate antioxidants. We paired her eggs with colorful peppers and spinach to create a synergy of nutrients. After a few months, Linda called me with such joy in her voice. She said the glare that had been haunting her at night was starting to soften. She felt more confident behind the wheel again. Now, to be clear, eggs won't cure an advanced disease, but they act as a profound preventative shield. When your body starts giving you those early warnings, the fatigue, the muscle weakness, the blurred vision, it's often a cry for help, not a death sentence. For Linda, the egg yolk wasn't a cholesterol risk. It was the literal light that allowed her to keep seeing her grandchildren's faces clearly. We have to stop looking at food as just calories and start looking at it as instructions for our cells. When we give our eyes the lutein they need, we are telling our bodies that we aren't ready to go into the dark just yet. It's about giving yourself every possible advantage to keep your world bright and clear as long as possible.
We've spent a lot of time talking about the hidden benefits of the egg, but I want to pivot back to the danger zone. I think a lot of our listeners are probably nodding along, but in the back of their minds, they are thinking about those Sunday brunches or those quick breakfasts they've been having for years. We often fall into the trap of thinking that because we're eating breakfast, we're doing something good. But as you said, the egg is often just a passenger on a very dangerous vehicle. I want to get very specific. What are the combinations that we think are okay or even traditional that are actually sabotaging all the good work the egg is trying to do for a senior's body?
This is the part of the conversation where we have to be the most vigilant, Jane. There is a massive difference between an egg and a breakfast sandwich from a drive-thru. Many people think they are getting their protein by grabbing a quick egg, biscuit, and sausage wrap, but they are actually consuming a massive dose of sodium and processed nitrates that spike blood pressure and strain the kidneys. After 65, our kidneys and our hearts have less room for error. When we combine eggs with what I call the toxic four, processed meats like bacon or ham, heavy refined carbohydrates like white bagels, saturated fats like butter or margarine, and sugary sides, we are creating a metabolic storm. The high heat used to deep fry eggs in some diners can even damage the delicate proteins and fats in the egg, making them more inflammatory. I've seen so many patients who say, but I'm eating eggs. And then I find out they are smothering them in hollandaise sauce or eating them alongside a pile of greasy home fries. You are essentially taking a gold medal nutrient and burying it under a mountain of health risks. It's like putting premium fuel into a car, but then filling the rest of the tank with sludge.
It's a vivid image, Sanjay. It's so easy to see how we get tricked. We focus on the hero of the story, the egg, and ignore the villains that are crowding the plate. For a senior who wants to do this right, who wants to enjoy their breakfast without the sludge, what should their plate actually look like? If we are stripping away the bacon and the buttered white toast, what are the good partners that actually amplify the health benefits of the egg? How do we make a meal that feels like a celebration of health rather than a sacrifice of flavor?
The key is to think about color and fiber. Instead of the toxic four, we want to invite the healing partners to the table. Imagine an egg, poached or lightly scrambled, served with a side of sliced avocado for those healthy monounsaturated fats that your heart loves. Add a handful of sautéed cherry tomatoes or some steamed asparagus. These provide the antioxidants and the fiber that keep your digestion smooth and your blood sugar stable. Swap that white bagel for a slice of sprouted grain bread or even a small scoop of savory steel-cut oats. When you eat an egg this way, the protein and fats in the egg actually help you absorb the nutrients from the vegetables better. It's a perfect partnership. I always tell my patients, look at your plate. If it's all beige, white toast, yellow butter, brown sausage, you're in trouble. If it's vibrant green from spinach, red from tomatoes, the deep gold of the yolk, you're doing it right. This isn't just about dieting, it's about creating a symphony of nutrients that support your heart, your brain, and your eyes all at once. By changing who the egg hangs out with, you turn a simple morning meal into a powerful daily treatment for longevity. It is the easiest and most delicious medicine you will ever take.
Dr. Gupta, there is a reality for many of our listeners that we haven't touched on yet, and it's a deeply personal one. Many people over 65 are living alone, perhaps after losing a spouse or because their families live far away. I've heard from so many who say, Jane, why should I bother cooking a real meal just for myself? I'll just have a piece of toast and coffee and call it a day. There is a sense of giving up on the ritual of eating because the table feels too empty. But as you've said, this is exactly when the body needs that nutrition the most. How do we speak to that person who feels that cooking an egg is just too much work for one? And how can we make this life-saving nutrition feel accessible even when the motivation is low?
Jane, that is a point that resonates deeply with me. Loneliness can be just as damaging to health as a poor diet, and often they go hand in hand. I think of James Wilson again, our 90-year-old friend from Phoenix. After his wife passed away, James stopped caring about his meals. He felt that a real breakfast was something you made for someone else, not yourself. He was essentially eating to survive rather than eating to thrive, and his energy and mood were plummeting because of it. I told James that cooking for himself was an act of self-respect, a way to tell his own body that he still mattered. We worked on making it incredibly simple. I suggested he hard-boil 3 or 4 eggs at the beginning of the week and keep them in the fridge. That way, even on his lowest energy days, he could just peel an egg, have it with a piece of fruit or some pre-washed greens, and he'd have a high-quality, brain-protecting meal in 30 seconds. For someone with diabetes or blood sugar concerns, like many seniors living alone, this is a game changer because that protein prevents the sugar spikes that lead to irritability and that crashing feeling in the afternoon.
It's a beautiful way to look at it, that cooking for yourself is an act of self-respect. It's moving away from the "it's just me" mentality to "I am worth the effort." James's experience in Phoenix is so common that lack of energy often leads to a cycle of bad eating, which leads to even less energy. When James made that small shift, just having those eggs ready and making that commitment to his morning protein, what did you see change in his spirit? Was it more than just the physical numbers? Did it actually change how he felt about his day?
It absolutely did, Jane. The physical and the emotional are inextricably linked. Once James started getting that steady supply of protein and choline, his energy levels stabilized. He told me he felt less cranky and more capable of handling the small stresses of his day. He even started sleeping better because he wasn't going to bed with the blood sugar imbalances that come from a day of eating just toast and tea. But the biggest change was his outlook. He started seeing breakfast as a small victory, a way to kickstart his brain and his body for the day. He began to feel like he had the stamina to go to the local community center again, to engage with people. He wasn't just waiting for the clock to run out anymore. For anyone listening who is alone, please don't let your nutrition slide just because the chair across from you is empty. Your body is still a miraculous machine that needs high-quality fuel to keep your mind sharp and your heart strong. An egg is the ultimate solo food. It's pre-packaged, it's fast, and it's packed with everything you need to keep showing up for your life. That small habit of a nutritious breakfast can be the foundation that prevents a spiral into frailty and depression. It's a tiny choice that yields a massive return on your health and your happiness.
This has been such an eye-opening journey, Sanjay. We've gone from fearing the egg to seeing it as a potential savior for our muscles, our brains, and our eyes. But I know our audience. They are practical people. They want a rule. They want to know exactly what to tell their doctor or what to put on their grocery list. Is there a magic number? If someone is 72 years old and has a history of slightly high cholesterol or perhaps type 2 diabetes, what is the actual safe limit? We want to be empowered, but we also want to be safe. So how do we find that sweet spot where we get all the benefits without crossing a line into risk?
I wish there was one single number that fit every human being, Jane, but medicine is personal. However, we can look at the broad guidelines and then tailor them. For the vast majority of healthy seniors, the current science suggests that up to 1 egg a day, 7 eggs a week, is not associated with increased cardiovascular risk. That is a significant amount of nutrition. Now, if you are someone with advanced heart disease or poorly controlled type 2 diabetes, you might want to be a bit more cautious. In those cases, I often suggest a 2-to-1 strategy. Use 2 egg whites for every 1 yolk. This way you get a huge boost of that lean, muscle-building protein from the whites, but you still get a manageable amount of the brain-boosting choline and eye-protecting lutein from that single yolk. It's about balance, not elimination. We also have to look at the source of the eggs. If you have the choice, eggs from pasture-raised hens or those enriched with omega-3s can provide even more anti-inflammatory benefits, which is like an extra layer of protection for your aging arteries.
That 2-to-1 strategy is a fantastic practical tip. It feels much more doable than a strict yes or no. It's about being the CEO of your own health. But what about the fear of too much of a good thing? If someone really enjoys their eggs, is there a point where it becomes counterproductive? And how do we keep from getting bored? We've talked about boiled and poached, but if we want to make this a lifelong habit, we need to keep it interesting without falling back into the bacon and butter trap.
Boredom is the enemy of consistency, Jane. I always tell my patients to treat the egg as a canvas. You can scramble them with turmeric and black pepper. Turmeric is a fantastic anti-inflammatory for aging joints. You can make a crustless quiche with every leftover vegetable in your fridge. The key is to keep the partners healthy. If you're worried about the cholesterol, remember, it's the total quality of your diet that matters most. 1 egg a day surrounded by vegetables and whole grains is a completely different health profile than 1 egg a day surrounded by donuts and fried potatoes. If you have a specific health condition, always have that conversation with your physician, but bring the modern research with you. Tell them you want to use whole foods to support your muscle mass and cognitive health. The goal isn't just to survive our 70s and 80s, it's to thrive in them. By understanding your own body's needs and using the egg as a targeted nutritional tool, you're not just eating breakfast, you're building a stronger, sharper version of yourself for the years ahead. It's about confidence, Jane. Confidence that you are doing the right thing for your heart and your head, one meal at a time.
As we wrap up this incredible conversation, Sanjay, I'm struck by something you said earlier about how so many people just accept that getting older means getting weaker or losing their edge. It's almost as if we've been conditioned to view our 60s, 70s, and 80s as a slow retreat. But everything you've shared today, from Mary's restored strength in Florida to Linda's clearer vision in Seattle, suggests that it doesn't have to be that way. If there is one thing you want our listeners to hold on to when they walk into their kitchens tomorrow morning, what is that final message of hope you want to leave them with?
Jane, the most important thing I want people to know is that your body never stops listening to you. It doesn't matter if you are 65, 85, or 95. Your cells are still responding to the fuel and the care you give them. I have seen 80-year-olds start a simple protein and walking routine and regain a level of vitality they thought was gone forever. Toi gia không phải là một ban an. It is a different season of life, and it can be a season of incredible richness if we give ourselves the right tools. My biggest regret as a doctor isn't when I can't cure a disease, but when I see a patient who has given up on themselves because they think it's too late. It is never too late to nourish your brain, to protect your eyes, and to strengthen your heart. Don't let outdated fears or the convenience of processed foods rob you of your golden years. Treat every meal as a choice to be a little stronger, a little sharper, and a little more present for the people who love you. The humble egg is just a symbol of that choice. It's a simple, accessible way to say yes to your own health. I want to thank you, Jane, for creating this space to talk about these things with such heart, and I want to thank every listener for sticking with us. You have the power to change your trajectory starting tomorrow morning.
Sanjay, I can't thank you enough for your wisdom, your compassion, and for reminding us that we are still the authors of our own stories, even as the chapters go on. You've turned what could have been a dry medical lecture into a message of empowerment that I know will resonate in many homes today. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on Healthy Kidneys After 60. We hope this conversation helps you look at your breakfast plate and your future with a little more joy and a lot less fear. If you found today's episode helpful, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our upcoming deep dives into the secrets of aging with grace and strength. We have so much more to share with you, from heart health to the latest in cognitive wellness. Until next time, I'm Jane Pauley. Eat well, stay strong, and remember, it's your life. Make every bite count.
Thank you, Jane. It's been an honor. To everyone listening, take care of yourselves, stay curious, and I look forward to our next conversation. Goodbye for now. Sham.
Goodbye, everyone, and we'll see you in the next episode.